Bye. So thank you very much for inviting me to give this webinar today. I appreciate everybody who's in the attendance. I especially appreciate Xavier and Carlota's help with the translations. So today we're going to be talking about irrigation. And irrigation is a topic that we could spend, weeks talking about it. So it's a large topic with that goes into detail. So today we're going to try to cover the fundamentals, show you some of the strategies and techniques that people use, and hopefully open it up for some discussion at the end. I think this is important for a number of reasons. Usually when we think about irrigation and turfgrass management, we're worried about how we can produce the best golf conditions possible. But it's important to remember that only a tiny minority of the population golfs. So most people look at golf courses as consumers of water, something that is wasteful and doesn't need to be there. And so I think that water conservation is our #1 challenge in golf course management going forward. The good news is that almost everything you do to produce good playing conditions results in a savings in water. So we can come up with a long list of all the problems that overwatering causes, and a very short list of problems that using water carefully causes. So that's good. I think we need to become even more good with reducing water use, but we also need to become better at communicating all the things that we do already on our golf courses to conserve water. And we'll wrap up with a list of some of those things. So water conservation involves a lot of different aspects, like site design and planning. A lot in Wisconsin here in my climate, this is maybe what it looks like, and you can see these native areas that are becoming increasingly popular. They look nice and they don't need to be irrigated, and I think you can calculate a large water savings from doing something like that. Also, you don't have to mow them as often. This is one of my favorite pictures. I usually use this one as a quiz to ask the attendees what happened in this situation, and nobody gets this one right. So this is a picture. You can see the healthy grass is growing kind of outside that square, but in this case the superintendent cut a trench to add some wires to the golf course, and so the roots of the trees were cut off, and you can see how much healthier the grass is growing in the areas where the roots had been cut. So a lot of times we talk about the challenges of growing grass in shade as being a light issue, but this picture clearly shows that root competition from trees makes a big difference. So if you're talking about finding ways to grow healthier turf with less water, eliminating trees altogether or pruning back the roots of trees periodically would be a good idea. I think in humid areas and areas where there's ample rainfall, there's some opportunities to collect that rainfall, and this is an example of a golf course in Wisconsin that did that recently. So they had a problem when it rained or in the winter after the snow melted. All the water from the highway and the houses would run off onto the course and make the course wet and difficult to play. So they hired a golf course architect to come in and design some wetlands and change the way the ponds were. And the result from that, so they dug down their ponds to store more water. And when they received an inch of rain or 2.5 centimeters of rain, 25 millimeters of rain, they received over 1 million gallons, and I'm sorry I don't have the metric conversion for that, but it's a large number. 1 million gallons of runoff from the highway and the subdivision. And by digging down the ponds and creating those wetlands, they were able to increase the amount of water they could store, and reuse that water. I worked on this golf course, Northmore Country Club in Highland Park, Illinois, just north of Chicago. And we were located right next to a wastewater treatment plant. And it turned out that the north branch of the Chicago River was where we were getting our water for the golf course. But that stream would dry up sometimes and leave us without any water. So we were able to tap into the wastewater treatment plant to fill the ponds for irrigation, and thus, using what we normally would consider a waste source of water as a resource. In the United States, in the southern and western parts of the United States, use of wastewater is sometimes mandated or much more common. But in areas where it rains, it's very uncommon. But I think going forward in the next several decades, we need to use these types of sources of water. And that brings challenges, the challenges that we won't address today about water quality. So if you need to have a low salt content to keep the grass healthy, you need to pay attention to the amount of sodium in the water, and things like that. But those are the challenges that we can and need to overcome to reduce our consumption of fresh water. Okay, so going into the main part of the webinar now is we're going to talk about education as a tool to save water. So you need to educate yourself and your staff, your members or the public, communicate and document your efforts. So again, I think the default perception is that golf courses waste water, that they're not good at using water. And I think from being on the inside of this industry, I've learned that golf course superintendents do an extraordinary job of conserving water. But what we don't do very well is communicate and document those efforts, at least for the public's consumption. And so what I'd like you to do is start thinking about all the things your course is already doing to conserve water. And then as we talk about irrigation today, maybe you can think of some new things to add to that list. Okay, so let's get into the science of turfgrass irrigation. One of the main questions people ask is, how much water does the turfgrass need? And this is a question that's very difficult to answer. It depends on the type of grass you're growing. It depends on the soil that you have. It depends on your growing environment, how much shade or how much air movement. It depends on the temperature. The rough estimate, very rough estimate, is 25 millimeters per week. But there's no reason, there's no excuse for anybody to just use a rough estimate for irrigation. We need to measure the amount of water that's being used and work to replace the amount that was lost. So we're going to talk about how you can do that now. So evapotranspiration is a kind of a long, complicated word that's really a mashup of two different words. So that when water is lost from a plant leaf, we call that transpiration. And when water is lost from the soil surface, we call that evaporation. And it's very difficult to measure evaporation and transpiration separately. So we just combine them and call that thing evapotranspiration. And that's something that we can measure, but it's something that we usually estimate. So how would you measure evapotranspiration? You would build a box like this, and you'd fill it with your soil, and then you'd plant your grass on top of it, and then you would measure the change in weight of the soil and the grass on a daily basis. And the only thing that's going to change the weight of this box is water. So when there's more water in it, it'll be heavier. When the water leaves through evapotranspiration, it'll be lighter. And so this is how scientists measure evapotranspiration. But you're looking at this and thinking, yeah, there is no way that I'm going to do this on my golf course. It's completely impractical. So this is measuring actual evapotranspiration. Like I said, we do it in research on our plots, but almost nobody does this in on their golf course. So instead, what we do is we estimate evapotranspiration. And this is one method of doing that. It's called the evaporation pan method, where you put a pan of water out in an area, and the amount of water that evaporates from the pan tends to be related to the amount of water that is leaving from the grass. A more, I guess, maybe an even simpler way to estimate evapotranspiration is to use weather data. So this is an example of an equation that uses weather data to estimate evapotranspiration. It's called the Penman-Monteith equation. And it uses lots of different complicated factors in here, but these are all things that you can get from your weather station or from a weather station. And as I go around golf courses, I see more courses have their own on-site weather stations. But there's also weather stations all over areas. Maybe you can get access to weather station data from a nearby airport or a TV station or something like that. But if you can afford a weather station, I would highly recommend it. In fact, now I'm seeing golf courses that will have several weather stations around the course, maybe one in a shady, low area, and another one in a high, dry area to see the difference in the two microclimates. But like I said, you don't necessarily need a weather station on your golf course to use evapotranspiration data. This is a map of my part of the United States. This is Minnesota here and Wisconsin on the right. I live near the bottom right-hand corner of this picture. And every day we can go to a website and look at what yesterday's ET was. And this is collected from satellite data. It's probably less accurate than if you have a weather station on your golf course, but the point here is that the evapotranspiration data should be accessible to almost everybody in the world now. And you can use that evapotranspiration to help schedule your irrigation. So I started off with that picture of the box and called that actual ET. That's when we measure it. And the last few methods with the weather station and the evaporation pan is estimated ET. And my question here is, are these always the same? How do they match up? And the answer is no, they don't. When we look at the estimates of ET versus real ET, we tend to find that there are small differences between those two estimates. And the difference is what we call a crop coefficient, so K sub C. So we use a crop coefficient to adjust the estimated ET to become closer to what the research tells us would happen if we were measuring it. It's essentially a correction factor. So typical crop coefficients for turfgrass depend on the type. So if it's a cool season grass, if it's a C3 grass, the crop coefficient is a good starting point is usually 0.8. And if it's a warm season turf grass like Bermuda grass or zoysia grass, seashore paspalum, we often have to adjust that by a factor of 0.6, which is just a little more than half. So if the weather station predicts evapotranspiration at 2 millimeters, we have to multiply that 2 millimeters by 0.6, and then you'll get 1.2 millimeters. So that's the amount that you would want to replace. But this is a quote that I really agree with from Professor retired from the University of Maryland, Pete Dernodin. And he wrote that proper irrigation during the summer is an art more than a science. And what that means is we can't just use those crop coefficients, 0.6 for warm season, 0.8 for cool season. We're going to have to adjust these, and you may have to use several different crop coefficients during the year, or you might have to use different crop coefficients for different parts of your golf course. For example, this is a table that shows researchers measured the actual evapotranspiration, and then they used the Penman-Monteith equation for the estimate. And this is a table of the crop coefficients for several different cultivars of bentgrass. And so remember, I said cool season turfgrass usually has a crop coefficient of about 0.8. Well, here we see one value here on June 9th for pen links, it was 0.8. But if you look around this table, sometimes it's above 1.2. Sometimes it's right about 1. So these will fluctuate depending on the time of the year, the type of cultivar that you have. The amount of moisture in the soil will also affect your crop coefficient. So take a look at these two climates. One is a rainforest or an area that gets lots of rain, and the one on the right is a desert. Now, if we put a weather station in each of these areas, it might predict that the ET, the estimated ET, is the same for both of them. But if we put a box in the ground to measure the amount of evaporation, in the desert, the weight of that box wouldn't change at all because there's no water there to start with, to begin with. So the weight of the box would be the same because the weight of dry sand isn't going to change. So the amount, if you're keeping your course really wet, you'll get more evapotranspiration. If your golf course is usually on the dry side, you tend to lose less water. So that needs to be factored in. The other thing that matters is rooting depth. So you can see in this picture here a root mass of Kentucky bluegrass where it's cut very short at 1/4 of an inch, or not clipped at all, which is probably about 7 to 10 centimeters high. These have deeper roots, which means they have greater access to water, and they'll use water at a different rate. You can also look at this figure here from a drawing in Al Turgeon's textbook on turfgrass management. Grass that's cut here at 7 centimeters will have roots down getting close to 15 centimeters. Here, grass that's mown at maybe 2.5 centimeters will have roots that are maybe only 5 centimeters deep. So that's going to affect the amount of water that's used, and that your weather station won't have that information. So also cultural practices, how much and how frequently you irrigate, your mowing height we talked about. If you fertilize grass more, it will grow more, it will use more water than if you don't fertilize it. And then if you're trying to grow grass here in the shade, you're going to use less water than if you're doing that in full sun. So all those factors get lumped together into that crop coefficient. And like I said, the irrigation is more of an art form than a science. And your experiences and training will help you adjust those crop coefficients for irrigation. Now, we also have problems in the real world. A lot of times when we do research, we do them on square, perfectly flat putting greens, but you may have a golf course putting green that looks like this, and the irrigation system has not been designed perfectly, and you have maybe some areas where only gets hit from water by one irrigation head. Maybe some parts on the green are getting hit from 3 heads, maybe some from 4 heads. So those create challenges in getting your irrigation uniformity to be, or your irrigation to be uniform. So the big question, now we've sort of asked or answered the question of how much water does turfgrass need, and we said, well, we should use weather data to get a good estimate, and then we have to use our experiences to adjust that through the crop coefficient. But now let's say we know that we lost 2 millimeters of water yesterday. How should we apply that? Or we lost 20 millimeters in a week. How should we apply that on a weekly basis? And it depends a lot on your soil type. So if you have a sandy soil, it won't hold very much water. So you might only be able to put down small amounts at a time. If you have a nice silt loam soil, or a loam soil that can hold a lot of water, has good organic matter content, you're able to apply lots of water and go a long time before you need to reapply that water. If you have a clay soil, you might have to irrigate it similarly to a sand, where you have to add small amounts of water frequently. This is a graph that sort of shows the same thing. Available water is much wider here for a silt loam than it is for a clay or a sand. So the amount of available water in your soil will determine how frequently you need to irrigate, or you'll be able to irrigate. Another reason soil type matters, and in this case slope, is that the infiltration rate into the soil will determine how much or how long you can apply water. So if you have your precipitation rate or your irrigation rate is less than your infiltration rate of your soil, the water should soak in fairly evenly, even on a hill. But if your water is coming down faster than the soil and can soak it up, you'll end up with a very uneven distribution of water, where you have lots of water down here in the slopes and the knobs will tend to dry out. And of course, you've noticed this on your golf course and your fairways and on your slopes, and you deal with this challenge all the time. And we'll talk about some techniques for addressing it. So the common irrigation strategies are deep and infrequent, light and frequent, and then a third way called deficit irrigation, which I think integrates aspects of both of these. And then my joke here is just pray for rain. You can see this golfer out there playing through the puddles. The benefits of deep and infrequent are a long list. Reduced shoot growth, enhanced rooting, lower leaf succulence, better disease tolerance, and improved turf quality. So in general, the goal is to water deeply and infrequently, which helps to grow deeper roots and have less succulent tissue on top. Now, if you look at the benefits of light and frequent, the list is very short. Perhaps decreased nutrient or pesticide leaching, and maybe decreased localized dry spot. But all the other negative things that were implied with the benefits of deep and infrequent apply here. So more shallow rooting, more succulent turf, more disease prone. Those can all be problems. So often we say it's best to irrigate deeply and infrequently. But like I mentioned before, a lot of times the soil type we have, or the rooting depth that our grass has, or the capacity of our pumps does not allow us to irrigate deeply and infrequently. So a lot of times we're forced to irrigate lightly and frequently. And I think that's not necessarily bad. I think that by using what we'll call deficit irrigation, we can get many of the benefits of deep and infrequent watering while watering frequently. So let me explain this. If you apply less water than is lost from your estimated ET, your soil will slowly dry down. And I think a lot of the benefits of deep and infrequent irrigation are related to you have a dry soil. And a lot of the negative aspects of watering lightly and frequently are just related to having a wet soil. So you can have a dry soil and water every day if you're applying less water than was lost for that one 24-hour period. And the research supports that. So Fry and Butler in 1989 showed that irrigating at deficit levels frequently produced higher quality turf than if the turf was watered infrequently. I'm going to show you some more data here from Rutgers University, where we just left a really nice International Turfgrass Society research conference. In this case, they grew bentgrass, and they irrigated it to a fraction of actual ET. So these are an example of scientists using those boxes to measure how much water is lost. And they had a rainout shelter, so they were able to prevent rain from falling on the plots. And these are graphs of their data. So on the left here we have visual turfgrass quality. 9 is perfect and 1 is totally dead. And the top two graphs are of creeping bentgrass. And those are the ones we're going to focus on. Colonial and velvet bentgrass are really rare. So creeping bentgrass is the main form. And you can see by the end of the year, the two top qualities, and this is the data from 2002, and these are the data from 2003. By the end of the year, the best looking grass here was irrigated at either 60 or 80% of the actual evapotranspiration, drier soil. Now, in 2003, the worst turf quality was from the one where the amount that was lost was replaced every day, 100%. And in year one in 2002, the 100%, the wet plot, it looked as bad as the one that was irrigated at 40% of evapotranspiration. So the storyline here is that it is better to maintain a dry soil. The grass needs some water, but if you overwater, you're going to have create trouble. And again, that's something that we talked about in the beginning. We know that over-irrigating creates a lot of challenges. We want to conserve water, and it turns out that having the best turf quality also lines up with using smaller amounts of water. So I think the negative reputation of light, frequent irrigation is undeserved. I think if you monitor the quantity of water that's lost on a daily basis, you can maintain high-quality turf and avoid the drawbacks that we usually say come with watering on a daily basis. If your soil can hold more water than so you can irrigate maybe once a week, that's great, and there's nothing wrong with that. But in situations where the turf must be watered more frequently, I think understanding how much water is in the soil and applying an exact amount can really help. So the goal is to optimize the soil moisture uniformity. And this is the number one challenge with getting water on a golf course. This is a picture of a golf course near where I live, Erin Hills, which recently hosted the U.S. Open. Many different soil types on this golf course, lots of slopes, and it's a challenge to make the soil moisture uniform throughout this golf course. But that's, of course, what the goal is. Like I already mentioned, your irrigation head spacing plays a large role in how uniform your coverage will be. And there's definitely ideal spacings, so you can have an optimal design, but we all know that we're usually working with less than desired irrigation designs. Maybe they're out of date, or the design wasn't optimum from several decades ago. So just having a good design can make a big difference. Having the correct pressure makes a big difference. This is another picture from Al Turgeon's book, Turfgrass Management, and it shows the moisture distribution from correct and low and high pressure. If you have low pressure, you tend to shoot a stream of water. You have wet near the sprinkler head and wet far away. If you have high pressure, you get really fine mist that kind of gets sprayed all over and blown with the wind. But you can see the correct pressure gives a very predictable distribution of water, and if you put another head right where that one ends and throw it towards the other head, you get a very nice even distribution of moisture. So getting that pressure correct. Now, what you can do to check these things is take rain gauges or cups out and put them on a regular grid spacing, run your irrigation system for a period of time, and then measure how much water is put in each cup. Now, ideally, there would be the exact same amount of water in each cup. This is called an irrigation audit. And on the bottom of this slide, I have a credit to Steve Prynne, who wrote a nice article a number of years ago in pitchcare.com that describes how to do an irrigation audit. And there's many places you can find where to do this, but this I thought was a good one to share. Here's another picture of somebody using an irrigation gun to measure the distribution uniformity. So you set your cups out on a grid, And you calculate distribution uniformity by taking the average of the lowest 25% of the cups. So you measure all the water in the cups, and then you organize them from highest to lowest, and the average of the lowest 25% divided by the total average in the cup is your distribution uniformity. Now, if your lowest average is almost equal to the total average, your distribution uniformity is going to be near 1. That's nearly impossible to achieve. We usually say a value of 80% is good, or 0.8 is good. Less than 0.6 is usually poor. So if you have a distribution uniformity of 60 or 40, 50%, you probably need to adjust things like your nozzles, or the angle of your head, or the pressure of your system to get a better distribution uniformity. However, with the advent of soil moisture probes, I think the emphasis on monitoring distribution uniformity has decreased a bit. Because instead of looking at how much is in a cup, I can just take a device like this out and measure how much is in the soil. There are many different types of soil moisture meters on the market right now. This is the one that I have the most experience with, and I have positive experiences with it. There's another device called the Pogo that I've also heard people like to use, and it has some mapping software that comes along with it. You'll be looking at about $1,000 to $1,500 US for these, so they're not cheap. But once people have these, I never hear them say, "Oh, I wish I never bought one," or I don't think it was worth the money. Usually, what happens is they buy 2 or 3 or 4, and they use them like crazy. So if you're not doing this, I highly recommend that you start. It has and will continue to revolutionize our ability to manage irrigation. Now, how deep to test is another question we get. I think it depends on the depths of your roots. My advice is to pick a depth that you think is representative of where your roots are and stick with it, rather than changing the depth of these probes as your root depth changes. But that's my opinion. Like I said, there are other ones. This is a device I've used before called Delta T through Dynamax. Does a very good job as well. You can buy lots of different sensors, but they all should be relatively expensive. There are some cheaper technologies on the market that don't work well. You want to avoid those. But if you're paying about €1,000 or so, that's about how much you should be paying. Now, you can also do something that maybe some people in the audience have, is install a permanent soil sensor in a particular location. Now, this won't necessarily help you manage your water on your knobs and low spots, but it will give you an idea of how much water is leaving the turf on a given day. So it can be used to help you schedule irrigation to determine the base amount of water that you want to apply. And again, there's lots of different devices, from more expensive to less expensive, but I would say if you're going to use one of these methods, to use the handheld device. Use one of these, and if you can afford an in-ground sensor, that's great, but it's secondary to the handheld ones. Okay, now I'll give you an example of how distribution uniformity of an irrigation system and soil moisture monitoring match up. So we built this sand green as a USGA style green with a 1% slope. You can see the slope that we're shooting here during construction. We grew it in. In this case, the slope moves down towards the right side of the screen. And then we went out and measured the irrigation distribution uniformity. So you can see that in the lower right-hand corner where my mouse is, and we found it to be 80%, which I said is really good. It's hard to get a value of 80, but we were achieving 80% irrigation. But then we took our moisture probe and we made a map of the soil moisture on that putting green. And where the letter B is where the slope went. So this area was very wet. And that's because the water was moving down towards that sloped region. We had nearly 40% moisture in this corner, and up here near the top, the moisture was only about 20% or 18%. So ideally, if you're managing a golf course, you want the most uniform distribution of water possible, and this was not cutting it, even though our uniformity was 80%. So what we did was we capped this head off. We dug it up, we put a cap on it so it couldn't irrigate, and after 2 weeks we came back and we measured the distribution uniformity of the system and found it to be 12%. That's really, really bad. But if you look at our moisture, soil moisture uniformity, it was much better. So you can see now most of the green is in the 10 to 13% range, and that corner, this head that we capped off, was still the wettest area, even though this head wasn't shooting any water. So why is this still the wettest area? Well, because the water drains from the high area down to the low. So that's something that you have to factor in, especially on sandy soils. So my point here is that monitoring the evenness of your soil moisture using a handheld probe is much more useful than trying to get your distribution uniformity to be perfect. So in this case, the best thing to do was to adjust your irrigation heads to give you the most uniform water distribution in the soil. So using ET-based irrigation, scheduling in the real world requires you to monitor soil moisture levels frequently and on all different areas of the course. It will require you to hand water, I think, in most cases. I know some people don't have the budgets to do that, but if you can, it's the best way to save water. So you put down the minimal amount of water to keep the grass alive on the high spots or on the low spots, and then use a hose to hand water the high spots. That prevents overwatering. Use surfactants. I'll show you some pictures in a second, but wetting agents and surfactants are some of the best tools that we have. And then do what I did. I capped off that head in the previous slide. You can percent adjust heads up or down based on the soil moisture you're seeing to get more uniform coverage. So soil variability matters here. You can see we have a bunker on the left-hand side, and golfers for years have been hitting sand on top of this green and creating a layer of sand here where, where the grass is dead, there's not much sand, and the turf is starting to thin and wear out. So you may want to check the depths of sand across your putting green to help you understand your moisture management. So here we took a soil probe in front of the bunker and found several inches of sand, and the soil, away from the bunker, you can see that it's much less sandy, and that affects a lot of things. It affects how easily it compacts. It affects how much irrigation it's able to hold and where that irrigation drains to. Okay, so I said surfactants are wonderful tools, and this is some visual evidence of this. This putting green was irrigated at a very low rate. The plot on the right has no wetting agent, the plot on the left does, and you can see we're green and the moisture is uniform, whereas the one on the right is starting to dry out and it's hydrophobic, so it's very difficult to wet back up. This putting green was constructed out of sand. The areas where the water is puddling and ponding is areas that did not receive a wetting agent, so that water will run off and won't soak into the green. You can see all the other areas, the wetting agents help the water soak into the grass. Absolutely critical tool for conserving water, especially on sandy soils. Just another picture here. So after the irrigation shuts off, the water sits there in ponds, and it'll drain off to the lowest spot on the green. And you can see the high spot here within the black box is already showing signs of drought as that water runs off to the bottom of the plot. Just another picture here. We were able in Wisconsin, now every climate's going to be different. In Wisconsin, we're able to irrigate at maybe 30% of estimated ET with a wetting agent. If we don't use a wetting agent, we have to water at 80 to 100% of ET to keep the grass green and preventing hydrophobicity. Now that percent, it depends on how much it rains in your climate and what type of grass you have. But the point is here, using wetting agents, we were able to save about 70% of the water, and we had firmer, faster conditions. So wetting agents, I'm a big fan of them. We don't have time to get into the differences between products, but my experience has told me that find a product that fits your budget and use it. I've seen a lot of good performance out of fairly low-cost wetting agents. So try them out, find ones that work for you. They don't necessarily have to be the most expensive ones. Another graph here showing the average soil moisture was probably about the same on the plot with no wetting agents and on the one with the wetting agent, but the uniformity is much better where we have a wetting agent. So you can see the shade of green, we're about 9 or 10% with a wetting agent, but on the plot without a wetting agent, we have some areas that are over 17%, and other spots that are less than 2%. So we have a lot of variability in soil moisture uniformity. With a wetting agent, the uniformity is much higher. So in conclusion, I think using deficit irrigation, which requires some measure of ET, can improve your turf quality when you're using a light, frequent irrigation strategy. So monitor the amount of water in your soil and irrigate to a set amount. ET varies considerably. So this is a graph of the ET from my research station over a year. And you can see here in the midsummer we have some, and these are in inches, so I apologize for that, but you can see we have almost 0.3 inches of ET on one day, and then very shortly after it drops down to 0.1. So the amount of ET you get varies quite a bit day to day, and you need to be monitoring that and measuring that to make sure that you're not over or under applying. I think you have to use soil probes to fine-tune your system. To get the best performance, you need to use soil moisture probes to make things more uniform. Traditional irrigation auditing, where you put the catch cans or the rain gauges out and run your irrigation system, I think that still makes sense, but you need to take it to the next level, you need to use these soil moisture probes. Wetting agents are vital, especially in sands, although the differences between them have been difficult for me to quantify. But overall, wetting agents will improve turf quality, make the grass more playable, will conserve water, and just allow for overall better conditions. So we're wrapping up here, and I want to for many of you, maybe some of the things I talked about you're already doing, or you've been doing those things for years. Take this moment to think about all the things that you're doing to save and conserve water, not just to produce high-quality golf conditions, but also to conserve water. Like I said, most of the people on Earth don't play golf, and they're concerned about water availability for the future. And golf courses are a target for wasting water. So communicate your efforts. This is a list from golf course just down the street from me. I asked them to do the same. What are the things you're doing? We're matching water application to plant requirements. That means measuring water loss from the soil and monitoring ET and putting down just enough. They've been reducing and eliminating irrigation from out-of-play areas. They're putting down their water in the early morning when evaporative losses are the lowest. They use wetting agents, which I just showed can save lots of water on sandy soils. They're adjusting their individual irrigation heads depending on the slope, the shade, the drainage. They're using soil moisture sensors, and they use hand watering to help the irrigation system inefficiencies. Again, communication is a really big part of water saving efforts. And if you're saving lots of water and not communicating it, you're not doing yourself or your staff or your golf course any favors. So with that, I'd like to thank you very much for your time. Thank you again, Xavier, for inviting me, and Carlota for putting up with my help, doing the translation. I'm sure that's quite a difficult task, but thank you all for attending, and I would be happy to open it up for discussion and answer any questions that you may have.
Hi, Doug. Thank you very much again. It really has been a really interesting presentation. Just a second in Spanish. Si queréis hacerle alguna pregunta al profesor Doug Soldat, pues las debéis introducir en el apartado del chat. Entonces yo se las pasaré, las leeré, las escribís y yo las leeré para que las pueda responder el profesor. Entonces, pues eso es, esperamos que un poquito lo interesante de estas charlas es que ahora haya un poquito de interacción y y podamos resolver cualquier duda que podáis tener. Carlota, si te parece, lo que haré, ya que le estás traduciendo, te haré una pregunta. Y es que, a ver si le puedes preguntar, es el tipo de riego frecuente y ligero respecto al infrecuente y pesado y profundo, digamos, dependerá del tipo de suelo. A ver si nos podría hablar un poquito cómo monitorear, no monitorear, cómo determinar un poquito si son suelos más arenosos o con más arcilla, la influencia y cómo se puede determinar más en cada caso.
We would like to know if you can specify more in which situations is better to have one type or the another.
Okay, so again, I think, and I don't mean to give up on this question, but irrigation science is really difficult. So there's still an art form to doing it. We don't have very many studies that look at comparing deep and infrequent versus light infrequent. I would say what you want in general is a relatively dry surface with adequate moisture deeper in the soil. And so a situation where if your soil is dry all the way through, you're going to be better off with a deep irrigation to wet the lower parts of the soil. That will encourage your roots to go down to get that water. But if you have a dry surface and you have water deep down below, you can water lightly and frequently because the surface will remain dry, the roots will go down to the bottom. So I think take a soil probe. Your soil moisture probes maybe only measure the top 5 to 7 centimeters, but it'll be good to go down deeper and see if you have moisture down deep. And if you don't, you always want the deeper soil to have some moisture in it. So it's an area that we're still working on, is to fine-tune how turf should be irrigated. One thing I didn't mention was there's infrared cameras. Maybe you've seen these where it shows you how hot the turf is. You can see the temperature of the turf, and that gives us an idea of the water status of the plant. And I think those technologies will help answer those questions better, like what is the most beneficial way to irrigate. But I would say, if I have to give you an answer, I would say it's usually best to go deep and infrequent. But because we can't always do that, if you have to do light and frequent, measure how much is in the soil. Don't over irrigate. Over irrigating will cause problems.
Thank you. And there is another question. If you agree, we'll do the same. I say in Spanish, and Carlota is translating for you. Okay.
Yep, great.
Okay. Mira, Carlota, otra pregunta. En suelos con mayor porcentaje en materia orgánica y arcilla, donde si hacemos un riego profundo, la inercia del agua, en tanto a la variación de la temperatura, cómo afecta a la calidad del césped, ya que en altas temperaturas la temperatura del suelo se mantendrá más alta durante mayor tiempo. ¿Me has entendido? No sé si has entendido.
Sorry, Xavier, I am
Sí, sí, mira, te lo repito. ¿Cómo afecta
Sorry,
el
Xavier,
suelo?
I have a problem. I am hearing myself through,
Okay, okay, no problem. Okay,
Yes,
let me say. If you want, I can say in English. No problem, Carlota. Okay, joke. One question. In soils with more clay or organic matter, whether and we do a heavy watering. When the soil is in fill capacity, the temperature of the water remains more. I don't know how to say. It's difficult. It's more. The change is more slowly.
Yeah.
So how does it affect to the turf quality in terms that in high temperatures the soil is during more time in high temperature?
Yeah, so that's a great question. That's something I wanted to cover, but probably didn't have time to. And so, if you're growing bentgrass in a hot climate, can you hear me, Xavier?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
If you're growing bentgrass in a hot climate, one thing that we've learned is the best way to keep that grass alive and high quality is to have a cool soil temperature, and water holds on to heat really well, and air doesn't at all. Air is a very poor insulator, and water is a very good insulator. So if you have a warm soil with a lot of water, your bentgrass quality will decline. It doesn't matter so much for warm season grasses, but one thing we recommend is to keep your bentgrass very dry, because then when nighttime comes, it'll cool down quicker. And when you have cool nighttime temperatures, your bentgrass is much more likely to survive. So it's another reason to have the best situation is to have moisture down deep in the soil and a dry surface with the roots that go down to get that moisture. Now, easier said than done, but again, it's another reason not to over irrigate a bentgrass soil in a wet climate. And sometimes the best way to irrigate then would just be to do that very lightly and frequently, so that the water that's in the soil is used up really quickly, and then that'll allow the soil to dry down overnight, or to cool down overnight, because there's not so much water in it. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yes. Okay, thank you. Carlota, no sé si podemos hacerlo. Te leo las preguntas. Mira, hay José Manuel Rivera. Can you hear Carlota? I don't know.
Hi, Doc. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Okay. Entonces la leo en español y ella te traduce. Mira, José Manuel Rivera pregunta, ¿la auditoría del riego es algo complejo?
José Manuel Rivera has a question, and he would like to know about the irrigation audit you mentioned in your presentation.
Digo, la mayoría de los campos, como bien dices, tienen sistemas antiguos de riego.
Because many fields have old irrigation systems.
Y entonces dice, y se puede realizar de una manera un tanto difícil. Entonces lo que pregunta es si le puede recomendar otro método para hacerlo de forma más eficiente.
Recommend another system, another method in order to make irrigation more efficient.
Yeah, so there's not much you can do with old, poor systems. The few things you can do, one that I think most people ignore. Excuse me a second. Just finishing up my Q&A and my webinar. We'll be done in a few minutes. So with old systems, leveling heads, so getting heads to be level, actually makes a big difference. And replacing nozzles can be a somewhat inexpensive way to maybe improve your coverage. But again, with old systems, there usually is not too much you can do. And hand watering plays a big role, but maybe just communicating. If we upgrade our system, this is how much water we may be able to save. Or if people are questioning why the water use is higher at this golf course compared to the other one, explaining the inefficiencies of the system is a good way to start.
Okay, another question. If you need to go, you have to go because do you have time?
Yeah, I have time. Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. There's another question from Karem Meza. He says that he has a TDR sensor, but he is getting a very high very high values. He's asking if it's, of course, I think he says that it's necessary to calibrate and how to do it.
They usually, in my experience, they don't need to be calibrated individually. There's some settings on there that that may be wrong. So there's a soil type setting. There also, if you have the wrong depth of probe setting. So if I have 7 centimeter probes, but the machine thinks they're only 3 centimeters, that would give you a wrong answer. I would contact the manufacturer, and usually they can help. And it could be that the device is faulty.
Okay, another one from Mario Martinez. What kind of irrigation do you recommend if there is an anthracnose on greens and temperatures between 30 and 40 degrees Celsius degrees? Sorry, I don't know it in Fahrenheit. 30 degrees, 40 degrees Celsius degrees.
Hot. Yeah, hot.
Yes. Oh, okay. Yes, hot temperatures. Okay.
Yeah. So anthracnose is a stress disease, and I would think I would do the things that that alleviate the stress on the grass. Frequent top dressing has been shown to be beneficial. Decreasing the frequency of mowing, raising the mowing height, and in general, most diseases thrive in wet conditions. And like I said, with the hot temperatures, it'll retain heat. So you want to dry the surface down as best you can and alleviate the mechanical stress from mowing and rolling.
Okay, great. And the last one, sorry, from Nicky Oliver. He says he has a sensor. He has a TDR. When it's the best time to measure the humidity in the morning or late at the afternoon?
Yeah, I usually both of those are good times. Usually how I see people use these devices is you go out in the morning and you measure the areas that tend to dry out and you see what the moisture is, and you should know what level you want to bring them up to. So for example, let's say our golf course, we know that we need to have 20% moisture to be safe by the late afternoon. If we're at 16 in the morning, it might start to wilt. So when you have your moisture probe, you'll start to figure out when it's going to wilt and how how much the moisture will go down during the day. So let's say if I'm at 16 during the day, by the afternoon it might drop down to 10, which is where I wilt. So I really want to be at about 20 in the morning, so it'll drop down to 15 and it won't wilt. So that's usually how I see. So you need to know the afternoon times when the grass is wilting, and it's good to see the morning. But after you figure out your system, you can pretty much just measure in the morning and then use hand watering to bring up to those targets.
Okay, so that was the last one, the last question. Again, thank you very much.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
It was really, really interesting.
Great.
Let me say goodbye to the attendees, but I want to appreciate, I appreciate again your collaboration. It was really great.
Well, thank you for having me.
Okay, thank you. Pues nada, hasta aquí las preguntas. Espero que os haya gustado la charla. Dentro de unos días estará colgada en los vídeos en el canal. Tenemos un canal en YouTube, Campus del Césped, o en la misma página web, www.campusdelcésped.com. Ahí están todas las charlas que hemos ofrecido, colgadas en español y en inglés, para que podáis, el idioma que más os apetezca. Por nuestra parte nada más. Agradecer de nuevo a los patrocinadores su ayuda para tirar adelante el proyecto y esperemos que a finales de agosto poder ofrecer otra sesión un poco más espaciadas durante el verano, ya que todos vamos un poquito más agobiados con el trabajo. Pues nada, hasta la próxima y muchas gracias por vuestra atención. Okay, so thank you very much and I hope to see you again.
Thank you, Xavier. Thank
Okay,
you, Carlota.
bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.